Joe Servant. Joe served as Kentucky's Poet Laureate from 2000 through 2003. He is the author of 4 collections of poems, most recently Rafting Rise from the University Press of Florida, his book Anne and Alpheus, 1842-1882, was awarded the Arkansas Poetry Prize by the University of Arkansas Press. Other awards include the State Street Press Poetry Prize for his book We Will All Be Changed, and fellowships from the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Fulbright Program, the Asia Foundation, and the Al Smith Individual Artist Fellowship from the Kentucky Arts Council. His poems have been published outside the U.S. in Canada and the U.K., Malaysia, Singapore, and China. He has recently completed Kentucky, the First West, the 3rd book in his Kentucky trilogy. He is a professor emeritus at Western Kentucky University. Joe Servant.
I sort of have some informal thoughts about writing. I think that one of the things that writers forget, maybe not, but sometimes, I know I do, is that anything, anything that stirs your imagination is going to be good for you. And so I find that if I'm reading the strangest thing, the oddest thing, recently, for some reason, I picked up a book, I think it was an old geography text, as a matter of fact, and I was kind of thumbing through, and I came to a description of the Carboniferous Age, where Kentucky's coal fields were laid down. And, I read this, and, I remember studying it in geology, years ago in college, and then sort of forgot it. And then a couple of weeks later, then I was writing a poem, and suddenly this poem about the laying down of coal fields from the bodies of creatures and plants came into my mind, and this became the source of a poem. So you never know where things are going to come from. I had the hardest time getting students to understand that, and I would always tell them, well, my grandmother used to say, everything is grist for the mill. In terms of the imagination and the mind. Whatever you take in is going to be useful. And even the subjects that you study as an undergraduate that you think, well, why do I need to know this? You never know what use it's going to be put to in your mind. The mind is a mill that is constantly grinding and regenerating and creating new forms. One of the things that has powered my imagination all my life and probably underlies the writing of these 3 books about Kentucky, the one that I've just recently finished with the 3rd. And it is this, I can remember very clearly when I got old enough. My friends and I always camped out from 4th grade on up, but when we were young, we camped out in our parents' backyards or in the empty lot next door. It was not going out in the woods by ourselves. But when we finally got to the age where we could do that, there was a fairly large woods near Owensboro where I grew up called Jackson's Flats. And this is a place, it was a featureless, flat floodplain area where Panther Creek would flood every spring. But it was wonderful squirrel hunting. But it was very easy to lose your way in these woods because there were no hills and there were no rocks, and so you had to pay attention to the trees. And I got turned around in there several times squirrel hunting, and my father also. And I remember camping in that area with my cousin for the first time, and we began to talk about that night around our little campfire, wonder what it was like for the first human beings to come into this country. Can you imagine walking across from Asia and you've got this whole landmass? Of course, you're not aware of it, but in our imagination, it's a powerful thing. and present-day imagination. You walk across and you come into this land, and it goes down for thousands of miles, and there are no human beings in it. At 14 or 15 hour old we were, it was a constant source of amazement. And that has stayed with me all my life, and I've often tried in my poems about Kentucky to imagine what it was like. That was sort of a question. What was it like for the first migrants coming through the Gap or down the river? What was it like for the first people to come into this area? Who were the first white people? Who were the first Europeans to see this land? They obviously weren't settlers coming from Virginia through the Cumberland Gap. So anyway, I'll just read one poem, which is an attempt to deal with that source of imaginative wandering and wondering both that I have done all my life, and I think it's probably going to end up being the first poem of this book. It's simply called The First Hunters. Where they lived, it was cold. There were storms. Everywhere was frozen. Even the sea had a mighty desire to freeze. They dreamed of milder lands, full of deer and herds of buffalo. They went east, they went south, over the snowy plain, over the frozen sea, over the hard, slippery water. Of these people, the freest were the hunters. The purest were the hunters. They did not build houses together. They followed the animals. They found the mighty path made by elk larger than 3 elk. They found the path beaten down by great buffalo whose horns grew from their mouths, long, curving moons. The hunters followed this road south. They stopped at salt places where all the animals came, and the hunting was always good. They followed the trail and hunted the salt springs until they came to a beautiful river. Crossing the river, they found a place with great trees and rolling hills of grass and tall stands of cane. The animals had never been hunted. The animals were many. The buffalo traveled in large herds. It was easy to kill them for meat and robes. Deer started at them but did not run far. Bears grumbled at them and stood up like men to stare. The hunting was good. The living was good. The sun always shone. The deer and buffalo loved the clacking cane. The people were happy. The children's bellies were always full. The women smiled. The hunters talked among themselves. They smoked and talked some more. They poked at the fire with sticks. "Let us stop here," they said. "Let us live here, near the animals. This is the land we dreamed. This is the land Manito made for us." Thank you.